So, Bindi, thank you so much for agreeing to talk with me today. I'm really excited to find out more about you and what you're up to.
Thanks so much, Steph, for inviting me.
Yeah, so where do I begin? Yeah, tell me a little bit, if you would, about who you work with and how you help them.
Okay, so primarily at Ethical Change Agency, I work with ethical business owners, holistic healers and change makers in their field to basically promote themselves and align their message with their mission. And how I do that is through human connection and actually tapping into their passion. And when we do that, wow, you should see what happens. Like it's just life-changing stuff.
Mm,
So yeah, it is, I guess, very heart centered in that way. But as I was just saying to you, I kind of do have divine guidance that helps us through what we do. But yeah, there's all kinds of healers that I talk to every day. I help them through podcasts. We do some websites. We do some online business coaching, and it's international as well, not just locally. So I've got clients all over the world.
cool. And that
Mm.
works for me because I'm in the US and have many people from the US in my audience. Awesome.
Yeah.
So I'm really struck as you say that by the alignment in what you're talking about. I've been started talking about unmarketing a while ago.
Mm.
And because there's so many heavy concepts attached to marketing, especially with change makers, coaches, healers who have a real calling and purpose in what they do. And as soon as we talk about marketing, they're like, oh, I can't do it. I hate it. I don't want to selling, So I'm like, okay, let's unmarket your business. Toss out the idea of marketing altogether. Now, what do you love to do? How would you like to share it? And it's technically marketing, but it doesn't feel like it. And so that's kind of what I heard
Yeah.
in your words, that tap your passion, use human connection. That's what change makers want to do. That's
Yeah.
all they care about.
And you're so right. Like when we look at the traditional marketing, we pull that apart. It is very heavy, and it's got this energy to it that is really difficult to engage with, and people know they're being marketed to. So what I've found through my experience is when you connect with a human, you get a greater engagement. And you can have a million social media followers, but if none of them are talking to you, what is the point? You know, not having a conversation, you're not engaging, you might as well be, talking to the wall. So I just think when we have that human connection, we're going to get that greater engagement. And yeah, by looking at things differently, so what I tend to do with clients is I look at a holistic way of things. So I actually look at what they've already got and what they could potentially add to their footprint, I guess, if you think of it that way, or their little ecosystem for amplifying their message. And, looking at different ways we can do that than the traditional social media.
Mm,
Yeah.
cool. And that's the big reason why I reached out to you, although it feels more far-reaching and that there's lots we could explore here. Because I'm doing this no social media marketing experiment, like, well, how can we if we decided, because some people really feel strongly about it, I don't want to use social media, or there's a particular platform I don't want to use, but the message out there is you have to if you want to have a business. So when I visited your website and looked at what you're doing, I saw that you're doing a lot with audio and podcasts.
Mm.
So like, how do you see change makers in particular using podcasts to get their message out there and connect with clients?
Well, it's all about becoming a thought leader, and being an authority in your field as well. So if you can demonstrate that through conversations and sharing your knowledge and experience and what you do, whether it be through a podcast, through audio, or even through video, by having these different mediums being indexed through search engines, you're going to get greater results because the relevancy is going to be far higher. And it's what search engines love nowadays. They like that, the different mediums coming through, not just text-based websites and things like that. They want an enriching experience for users when they look for something. So I think there's so much power behind a podcast, when it's indexed in so many ways that it probably has a far greater reach than social media does.
Hmm. So just to make sure that I understand and anyone who might be listening or watching understands, what do you mean by indexed? And like, why is that important to me?
Yeah. So primarily when we create a podcast, it sits within a host, and that host takes the audio and any pictures or text that we put with that to promote the podcast. And then that gets distributed out into different channels. So, for example, Spotify might be one, Apple Podcasts might be another. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of channels that a podcast can be distributed through. Now, each of those get indexed in search engines that actually give it more and more relevance. So if it's showing up in more places, it's going to go further up in relevance because it's being shared. So, just the podcast alone without anything else around it promoting it, wow, the power of that being in so many places across the internet, it's so much power.
That's cool. And, I hadn't really thought of it specifically that way because one of the things that I've done a lot with content marketing and that type of thing back in the day when in order to get ranked, all you had to do was really create a lot of content and know to use the right keyword phrases, right? It was easy back in the day. And now it's like all these fat authority sites are dominating page one, right? So it sounds like the standards have changed. And what you're saying is that Google and the other search engines are really looking for rich media. So they want to see video on your website. They want to see your videos out there in other places. They want to see podcasts. And all of these things and audios and all of this makes for a really valuable experience for your website visitors. And therefore, you're going to be found higher up in the search engines when someone's searching, right? Did I get that right?
Absolutely. And so if you think of it, and this is part of that holistic ecosystem, if you think, okay, what is it that the search engines love? So they do like audio, they do like video, they like text, they like constant updates. And there are social signals that go with that as well. So together, it actually looks at your social media mixed with whatever you've published in different channels through the internet and brings the two together to match that relevance and bring it up even further. So, your social signals of where you're sharing things as well boost that even further. So unfortunately, social media does play a part in the results that we get in search engines. And everybody's experience will be different depending on what they interact with. So, yeah, I think if we are really conscious about what we're publishing and where we're putting it and how often, that can really deliver great results in search engines.
So what are some of the factors to consider in that? Like what we're publishing, where we're putting it? Like, could you give us some advice for that?
I guess consistency is a really good thing as well. So once you start something, keep going. Don't just be quite random about it because, it picks up on that as well. But, it might be, say we publish a podcast. We can then repurpose that content in different ways. So we can create video out of it, we can create audio out of it, we can create images out of it that can be used for social media sharing. We can create audiograms, which is like a video with audio or animation. We can create a blog out of it. We can create an article out of it. We can create web content. There's a million things we can do with just one piece of content and repurpose it in different ways that actually amplifies that even further than the original piece of content.
And that's really great too for me because there are certain types of content that I will rarely sit down and watch a video. I just won't.
Yeah.
But in the right circumstance, I'll listen to a podcast or I'll listen to it on Spotify. If I'm there, I definitely will read, but that's me. And there are all kinds of viewers with all kinds of different tastes. And then I might do something on Facebook when I'm there that I wouldn't do somewhere else. Or if I'm on YouTube, I might be looking for something else. So this is a way for more people to find you. Cool. So if I wanted to start with podcasting, maybe I have an idea for what I'd like to talk about. What would you tell me to really help it to be most effective as far as sharing my message and actually attracting clients and indexing and all these things that you know?
So with my clients, when we start a podcast, it's all about the mission. Okay, so the idea is probably the most important thing. So if you've got a really solid mission behind your podcast, it is going to have really great longevity, and you're going to have so many gems come out of that you can share in so many ways. And, there's so many different kinds of podcasts that you can do as well. So it's not always just, an interview type kind of style. You can even do a documentary that's just yourself. You can tell stories. You can, it can be pretty much anything. So it's really being creative. It's using your imagination. But, if you want to make an impact and you want to bring clients to you, it's about having a mission and actually, again, tapping into that human connection. And when we do that, we can't go wrong. We absolutely cannot go wrong. So I've got a client who is actually a naturopath, and we have been exploring this program called Metabolic Balance. And she and I have both been on this for 5 months, and our lives have changed, right? So we've been sharing our story about this program, and we have people hitting us up, wanting us to do more on it. And she's actually getting clients for this program through the podcast. So because we're sharing our story, we're being real about it as well. We're not sugarcoating this in any way. We're being very real, and we're talking about results. So again, it's coming back to that human connection and being a human is where we're cutting through and actually getting the clients coming back to us.
And that is so reassuring for people who are turned off by traditional marketing. Let's just be human. Let's have a real human connection with people. And podcasts are one really powerful way to do it.
Yeah.
So what do you think the biggest mistake people make with podcasts when they create them is?
There's a few.
You can give me more than one.
Oh yeah, I will. And this is the funny thing, I was just interviewing a Hollywood actress the other day, and I said to her, she does a podcast, and I said to her, I produce that many podcasts, but I don't listen to that many, but I listened to hers, and I loved it. Like, if you can create something that, again, is human connection, telling a story that even has a shock factor to it, that people are like, oh my God, what's going on here? That kind of stuff is great. What I don't love is when, and I see this a lot, where it's a lot about self-promotion. It's just a lot of, they talk a lot about themselves, and it's just that they're hard marketing. So when we've got the hard marketing, the sales, the push, that really turns me off. Really, really turns me off. Poor audio also turns me off. And, quality, I think, is another big thing. So I know a lot of people can just, do a podcast from their phone nowadays, but it's all about quality, and that all reflects back on your brand and how you represent yourself. Attention to detail, and just not doing the hard sell, I think, is really important.
So if someone was going to start, what would you suggest, if you're willing to, by the way, as a starting point for, the like, just decent quality, decent audio? Like, what does someone need?
Well, when I started out, I bought a simple USB microphone, and I plugged it into my laptop, and away it went. And I did it all through a WordPress site, and I just did it all myself in GarageBand, and that was it. And it wasn't bad. It wasn't bad at all. I created my own music, and there's so much to learn as you go through this process technically, to get things out there. And once you learn all that back end, it is super simple. But to do it well, it does take work. So my first podcast that I did, like I said, it was through a WordPress site that I worked out how to make the feed go to, where it needed to, which I thought was pretty good for my first go. But now I do it in a much more sophisticated way through hosts, and we have websites for podcasts and all kinds of stuff now. So it has come a long way in the last 3 years, particularly here in Australia. But yeah, like your only limit is your imagination. But I think the thing is that do what you can afford and do the best you can do.
Hmm. That's just good, solid advice. The best you can afford, the best you can do. Hey, whatever that is. I would tell people too, I'm like, just start it. Just start.
That's it.
And
Absolutely.
there are people like you and other people who offer, I don't know if you do this, but offer startup programs for podcasting. Like, hey, I'll show you the ropes, get you past the bumpy spots, and then you're on your own, right?
Yeah. I've actually got a client in the Middle East. We did that, and I taught her the process. We set it up, and now she runs it herself. So it's yeah, we can do that. I'm also looking at releasing an online course fairly soon for people to teach themselves how to do it and do it all themselves.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So there are a lot of options. Like, don't let the complexity stop you, right? Don't let the perfection stop you.
Yeah, and I'm in a lot of Facebook groups for podcasters, and my gosh, the self-talk I see in there of people like, oh, what about this and what about that, and they go into this spiral of things that don't matter. Like if they just got in and did it instead of obsessing over things that don't matter, like you said, you just have to start. Otherwise, you're just going to freeze in this paralysis, and I think you just got to keep going.
Yeah. And there are so many resources as you get in there that you can find and locate and use to get better, because there's a learning curve with everything, right? Everything has it.
There's a huge supporting community out there as well. So a lot of podcasters are willing to help other podcasters. And I've had a lot of people come to me asking for advice, and I quite often give it quite freely. But also, there's so many people with great messages out there, and holding on to those because they are afraid of what people are going to think. Just get out there and do it. Do it.
Cool. So now we've talked about not using social media. Now, actually, if you have a really good podcast or really good content anywhere, it's going to get shared, and that's a good thing. What would you suggest for someone who doesn't really like to spend a lot of time on social media, or if you have clients who don't do a lot with it or have reservations about some of the platforms? Like, what advice could you suggest for someone like that?
It is a tricky one, and I did have a client who just absolutely did not want to use YouTube because, and Facebook again is another one. I'm hearing a lot of people saying that there's with so many community guidelines and rules around what can and can't do, and some of the people that I work with have some very meaty subjects that don't get received well on social media. So it's like they keep getting banned all the time, things taken down, and there goes free speech, right? So also with YouTube, they're penalising for such stupid things and taking content down, and there's all these conspiracy theories going on around different channels. So, it's actually looking at where can we take our control back? Where can we actually provide our own platforms? And so, what I'm actually looking at doing is not using YouTube and creating my own TV channel. So by doing that, I have control over what goes in there, and I have control over where it gets distributed. So doing things like that, yeah, it's going to cost you a little bit of money, but once you've got it set up, you have complete control over that, and you can monetize it in a way that a third party is not controlling you like YouTube does. So that's just one example of how we're getting around something like that.
That's a good point. And I actually see a real need for this. As I've been investigating different things, there are so many platforms out there that are alternatives to Facebook communities, especially Facebook groups. And a lot of them are right on your own website. You can own it. You can invite people. You can make it paid. You can do whatever you want. You can make up your own rules. I see that there are a lot of people who are gravitating that way, and a lot of them have apps with the phone, so you can get similar notifications.
Yeah.
And I think it's showing that people are not accepting some of these things about social media that they don't like.
Yeah.
And they're just aware that there are different choices. So it's sort of like I used to see for a long time. I wonder what you think about this. This is slightly off topic, but I'm just too curious not to ask. That I was seeing, oh, wow, websites could kind of disappear. And there were some young people, millennials and younger, who are kind of leading the way in this. And they're saying, no, like websites are static and slow and clunky. Social media is nimble. All you need is a landing page and you just send people there and we can do transactions right here. And I saw that. I was like, oh, wow, you're seeing something here that, I'm a boomer by comparison. I don't get it, right? And I learned something in that. But I also see a swing back to, no, I'm inviting you to this property that I can actually control, so I'm no longer subject to the whims of Facebook or YouTube and Google and all this other stuff. So, yeah, what do you see about that as far as websites, and if anything? I know it's kind of an out there question.
And I saw this because before I created the agency, I had a web design business for 9 years, and I saw a trend in that as well. A lot of businesses actually just pointing to a Facebook page instead of having a website. And to me as a customer, I thought it was lazy. I also thought that, nah, you have no control over your brand and your presence and what you can do. And I recommended all my clients not to do that because, what if Facebook went away tomorrow? You got nothing. What if they shut you down? What if they say you can't have that name? That doesn't sound like fun to me, and that's not how I want to look at my business. So I am all for having your own branded personal website for your business, and not relying so heavily on third parties like social media. Whilst they're great for getting your message out there, they are monetized as well. They rely on you to work with their algorithms and to spend money and advertise and to penalize you when you don't follow their rules. So how about make your own and set your own ecosystem up so that you can control your message and amplify it wherever the hell you like.
Woo! You say it, Bindi. Oh my goodness. And I love that. Set up your own ecosystem. And it has the natural ecosystem. Like, where do you want to live? Who do you want to have there? Who are you inviting into your ecosystem? And we talked about this a little bit, like there's a way of collaborating rather than competing. Yeah. And are you seeing that in the businesses that you're working with? How are they collaborating and using their podcasts to do that?
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's kind of the ethos behind my podcast. It's about this ethical evolution, and it's looking at the decisions that we make and just everything that we do, and can we do it so that we create that collective change together? So, yeah, I am seeing some of my clients actually start to collaborate. I'm seeing, people from my podcast collaborate and creating change. So there is this ethical evolution happening where we are coming together. We are taking notice of, instead of competing with each other, we are supporting each other. And I don't know, if you look back on 2020, it was the big year, right? And there was a lot for us to take. But I think one of the things that's come out of that is that we actually are looking at what really matters to us. And, we're looking at what's around us and how we interact with it now. And I think there's more people coming together than pushing against each other.
That's really beautiful. And I love seeing that myself. And I sometimes wonder if it's because I live in this little bubble of more conscious entrepreneurs and coaches and healers and spiritual people, but I don't really care because I think if it's happening here, we can bring it to other people. We can show other people that there's a way and they'll join us.
Yeah. That's why we're here.
Yeah. So, I'm wondering, would you be willing to share how you suggest for your clients to use social media for their business, especially given the conversation we're having, so that they're ethically using it and using it in a way that creates their ecosystem and they control it? So obviously they're going to have their own platform as much as possible, I'm imagining.
Yeah, so I guess you take that same approach no matter what channel you use, and it is that human connection and having the conversation and telling the story. It's not about hard marketing. If you want to market, pay for it. But social media is meant to be social. It was never ever designed for business. But look where we are.
Hmm.
So if you look back to the original Facebook and what its purpose was, it was about connecting with your friends, right?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't about selling stuff. So I think we need to take a step back and remember that. That's what social media is. It's about being social. And if you want to market, pay for it. Um, so, yeah, what I do is I'm all about telling the story, having that human connection and sharing experience and making sure that wherever you have a touch point on the internet, it's the same experience throughout. So regardless if they find you on YouTube, Facebook, wherever it might be, they'll have the same branding experience, the same kind of look and feel, and the content will have the same mission behind it.
Hmm. So is that what you help your clients to first get just really clear on that mission so that they can spread that message wherever they go with consistency and clarity?
Absolutely. And the other thing is as well is understanding where you should and shouldn't be. So like,
Mm.
there's certain people who shouldn't be on Facebook. There's certain people who shouldn't be on Twitter. Depending on what they do and how they tell their story, some platforms will work better than others. And some will have a greater audience in Facebook and won't even use Twitter because it's irrelevant.
Hmm. Can you give me an example of that? Like who might, and I know it's going to be on a individual basis, but like of someone who really isn't a fit for Facebook, but would be great for YouTube or vice versa or something like that?
Yeah, I guess it really depends on the business. But well, for me, I don't use Twitter at all. I find Twitter is great for certain niches in business. Um, but for what I do, I don't find value in it. Facebook, I do use. I occasionally use YouTube, but again, very lightly. Um, and I also use LinkedIn and Instagram. Instagram is probably my number one, to be honest,
Mm.
because, I'm telling a story, I'm sharing stories, and it's a really great platform for that. So each channel has its purpose and the way you share a message, and I think you've just got to align to that. So like when you look at Twitter, it's like a micro blog. So, it's like a little news flash kind of thing. Whereas, Instagram's great for telling stories and sharing visual experiences, and so is YouTube. And Facebook kind of is now aligning themselves to that. So you'll see anything that's a Facebook-owned platform, you'll get a similar experience. So obviously Facebook own Instagram, they kind of work together. So yeah, I'm finding for some people, depending on what they want to get out there, you'll be able to work out which channel will work great for their purpose.
Cool. That's a really good thing to consider. And for a lot of people, one platform is more troubling than another. A lot of the people I talk to are really turned off by Facebook these days, especially after 2020 and some of the things that happened there and the way they were handled. But they really love Instagram, which is attached to Facebook, but it's a different feel. It has a different energy. So does YouTube.
Yeah,
It's quite different.
there's different communities within them as well. You'll get different kinds of people doing different things, and you'll know where to go for what. And I think people need to get a greater awareness of what they're sharing and who controls that platform as well. A lot of people don't even know that Instagram's owned by Facebook, but when you open it up, it says Instagram by Facebook. Like wake up, it's there.
Mm.
And even WhatsApp, they own that too. So
Yeah. So what do you wish people knew, especially ethical business owners, these change makers who you work with? What do you really wish they knew that they don't know about marketing their business and promoting their message?
I think, what I see is a lot of people need to educate themselves on how to use social media. Like, just because you use Facebook doesn't mean you can market a business through it. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, just because you use a website doesn't mean you can build one. So it's almost the adage of just because you can doesn't mean you should. So I think, yeah, it's getting an understanding for your purpose of why you're doing what you're doing. So it's coming back to objectives. Everything that I do with clients and in anything I do, I look at the end objective. Why are we doing this and what do we want to achieve? And if you can tap into that before you even take any action, you're going to know exactly whether you're going to meet the mark. So really, and it comes back to planning as well. So a lot of people just randomly throw things out that have no plan, and it's like, okay, that went well. It's just being planned and strategic about what you want to achieve, particularly if it's something big in your business. I think, you've got to be serious about it. You've got to put the work in, and you can't just, be half-assed about it, really.
I think that's really, like, in the beginning, there's a place for throwing stuff out there, right? Like, I don't know what's going to happen. And you get that feedback through the movement. But then at a certain point, if you know what you're after, you want these types of clients, here's your service, here's your mission that you really want to share, what you're passionate about, when you're clear on it, it makes sense to get intentional. What are we trying to achieve? Which is something that it's a 101 thing. I've seen this too when I've talked to people about their website copy or whatever they're putting out as a promotional piece. What do you want to happen when somebody reads this? And some people say, well, I just want visibility. I'm like, okay, well, what does that mean? Do you want them to actually do something? And I have a background in direct response marketing. So I was trained with call to action, even if it's a comment below, there's something that you want them to do, but certainly thinking about it. If the purpose is just self-expression, that's okay. I could do that. But most people in business have a purpose of creating some kind of engagement, inviting people into their circle to learn more about them, educating them, helping them in some way, providing tips or transformation, like all of these pieces. These are different objectives for a piece. And I think it's important to know them. That's kind of what I see you speaking to there.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is thinking ahead. So, like, what's the user experience? So if somebody gets to hear what happens, what do you want them to do now? Like you said, is, don't give people dead ends. Don't just put stuff out there and not expect people to follow through. It's understanding, okay, well, next step is they do this, then they do this, then they do this. And, through building websites, through social media, that whole customer experience, you need to look at it end to end. And how would it be if you were a customer? You need to get in their shoes and understand, okay, my perfect customer is this person. I do this, then I do this, then I do this. How do I want them to feel as they get through that experience? And do I want them to return? You've really got to put yourself in their shoes and go, okay, how's the experience for them? Would they want to come back and work with me again?
That's interesting. I'm in the process of looking for a new apartment right now. And since I have such a pet peeve about customer service, I'm like, what are you? And the experience, they're sending me to call centers in God knows where with people who can only schedule an appointment. They can't answer any of my questions. And the appointments have to be within certain hours. And then they have to send me to this other number where I call them there and nobody answers. And I get no return phone calls. And their automated system for booking doesn't work. I'm like, what is going on? There isn't that feeling of human connection, which I think is especially important with ethical businesses, holistic type businesses, right? Like that's what we're all about.
Yeah. It's all about the human experience. So, like, let's do ourselves a favor and put ourselves in their shoes because, would we want that?
So is there anything, like, what advice would you give to someone who was considering doing a podcast and not really sure about where to begin? What would you tell them the first thing to do?
So I actually do this really cool exercise with people called message to mission. And it's almost, well, it's an hour to 2 hours, and we sit down and we actually deconstruct everything that they want to do. And we look at really what sets them right. Like we get down to the core of who they are and what they want. And we look and right down to, we work out almost like a mission statement that they can really own. And if they can nail that, they can pretty much do anything. I have seen people do this and it has changed their business. Like I see so many conscious creators who, they do everything because they want to be relevant to everyone, but they're doing themselves a disservice because, one, they're diluting their message, two, they're burning themselves out, and three, nobody understands what the hell they do. So what we do is we actually go, okay, let's look at all these things. We put them on the whiteboard and we go, all right, what here do you really love? What's the service you really love to provide for your clients? And this goes the same for a podcast. You've got to love it, right? If you're going to put longevity into this, you've got to love it. So we look at what is it you really love, what sets you alight, and we tap into that. We hang on to that one. Everything else around it that, maybe you don't love, you put a lot of effort into, but really don't love doing it, we throw that away. We push it aside and we double down on what sets them alight. And then we work deep into that and we work, our purpose around that. Because imagine if you were on purpose, in flow, and delivering what you love to your clients, you're going to attract exactly the people that you need. And imagine that force behind a podcast. Imagine that.
I love that. You start getting fired up when you talk about that, Bindi. I'm digging it.
See how people change?
Well, I can feel the fire when you say it. And I also share that. I see people doing things because they think they're supposed to, or offering services because their clients asked for it. And instead of leading with what they love, what's in their heart, what's joyful, like what would you love to do so much that you do it, even if it didn't work? Like that's the kind of thing. Like when you show up and do that, and you're clear about it, and you're on fire with it, it's going to get you through the rough spots, because there are always rough spots and learning curves and obstacles and challenges that come up in anything. But if you're doing something you love in the process, you're going to stay with it.
That's it. And, I've had so many people say to me, but do you make any money from all these interviews that you do and, this podcast that you do? And I'm like, well, not directly. Not directly. Some of my guests are now my clients around the world. So tell me, is that podcast making money? Yeah, it is.
Yeah. And it's doing it through human connection and sharing your story. That's beautiful.
And I can already tell, and this is going to sound weird, I can already tell before I speak to a guest whether that connection is going to be there and whether that interview is going to work before I've even spoken to them. So, and I've had a few recently where, if people don't follow through, they don't show up, they keep rescheduling, it's not a priority for them, it never works. Never works.
Interesting. Do you cancel things if that happens? Like if you get that vibe?
I often go ahead with it, and then I sort of sit on it and come back to it later and go, is this really aligns to what I want to put out into the world? And some people just don't release it. Like I'll go through the motions of creating it and I just won't release it. So again, you can create, even me, I create these things and I go, nah, not feeling it, and I just won't do it. Yeah, I've put effort into it and time, and so have they, but again, it's setting rules for myself on what I'll accept in my channels.
I like that. And you're creating your ecosystem and inviting in people you want to have there and not inviting the rest.
For me, it's become a very sacred space, and you can tell that from the conversations that are happening. Like, and there's a certain type of person that is going to really connect and work in that space. So, yeah, it's become very special to me.
I love hearing that you're honoring, and I want to use the word protecting that. Like, no, this, yes, this, no, thank you. It's fine for somewhere else. And it takes a lot of clarity, first of all, about what you are for and what you're doing with it. And then also integrity to be able to say no. I know that sometimes I feel pressure in commitments and things to keep moving forward because I said, but at a certain point, I can't do it anymore, by the way, because something just comes up and I can't override it. Like, nope, 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 I can't. Okay, sorry. And
Yeah.
so much life is better when I listen to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And like even the way my business is structured now, like I used to do a lot of website work because of my background in digital. And whilst I'm good at it and I used to love it, I don't love it so much anymore. And I'd rather be doing a podcast than a website. And that's where my jam is. I'm going to go there, you know. So I actually took that service out of my business and I told clients I was working with, I'm sorry, I can't continue this anymore. You know, yeah, I lost money, but boy, was I sane. I was.
Yeah. And it doesn't sound like you regret it either.
Hell no.
Hell no. Cool. So Bindi, thank you so much. Where can people go if they would like to learn more about you? What's the best place to find you?
Best place to find me is ethicalchangeagency.com. I've got all the info about podcast services and soon to be launched TV. It is all there on the website and you can hit me up. I'm happy to chat to anyone.
Awesome. Thank you so very much. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you.